Join us at Glossy's Beauty and Wellness Summit from November 11th through 13th in Napa, California. Influential beauty and wellness leaders will meet to discuss strategies and pain points, discover innovative tech, and ultimately make valuable business connections through one-on-ones and casual networking. For a limited time, we're offering $200 off with promo code GBS24, no spaces. Again, that's GBS24 with no spaces. Go to glossy.co/beauty summit for more information and to secure your pass today. Join us September 12th in New York City as Digiday, Modern Retail, and Glossy bring together brand and agency leaders to connect as industry experts from Colgate, PepsiCo, and more dive into the rise of retail media and how it's begun to mature, providing an exclusive deep dive into the best practices and winning strategies. For a limited time, we're offering $100 off with promo code RETAILMEDIA, no spaces. Again, that's RETAILMEDIA with no spaces. Learn more and register today at digiday.com/retailmedia.
Hello and welcome back to the Glossy Week in Review podcast. I'm Zofia Zwieglinska, international reporter for Glossy, and I'm filling in for Danny, our usual host, and we're bringing on a new guest from our team for the podcast. This week, I'm thrilled to be joined by Tatiana Pile, our managing editor at Glossy. Hi, Tatiana.
Hello, thanks for having me.
And today we're diving into a fascinating and timely topic, and this is the main topic for the podcast. We won't be talking about our current kind of fashion news the way we usually do. So the role of fashion and beauty in politics, with the recent Democratic National Convention, which was held from August 19th until today in Chicago, we've seen fashion and beauty become an integral part of the political landscape, and particularly with Kamala Harris, but also speakers and attendees who wore some more subversive choices of clothing. And I think there's a big kind of discussion happening right now around the role of fashion and beauty with the upcoming election. And Tatiana, who's written about the beauty angles on the DNC, is on to kind of shed some light about how beauty is also playing a role, particularly in extending a symbolic kind of hand to Black voters ahead of the election on November 5th. So I'd love to kind of run through some of the days, because obviously we've had quite a few days of the DNC, and that also means quite a few different looks from the various speakers, and just some information just to start about the DNC. Obviously, big kind of conference to announce the speakers, have a lot of public support for the Democratic Party. I believe there's 20 million that tuned in for the first night of the DNC. So I think it's a very watched event right now in the US and internationally. And Vice President Kamala Harris has experienced a surge in approval rating. And I think this has been counted over the last couple of weeks by YouGov and Economist surveys. So it seems like it's actually having some kind of an effect as well. So yeah, let's dive into the fashion. There's so much kind of happening and going on. Any initial thoughts on what some of the key outfits are? I'll go into some of those details in a second.
I mean, the first one for me that stood out was former First Lady Michelle Obama's outfit. I think it was such a powerful statement. We don't often see, especially women in powerful positions like this, showing much pieces of their body. It's usually very conserved. So to see her with this sleeveless suit, it was powerful. And then, I mean, the braids. I think for me, that was probably more than anything the most significant part of her apparel or of her outfit, especially because she has been very vocal since leaving the White House about how her hair and beauty really played a part in her intentionality in terms of approval ratings with the public.
Yeah, I think it's had a really big role. And obviously it's such an integral part to, how Black women would perceive beauty. Like those visual signifiers are really important. And just calling back to the suit. So this was from New York brand Mont's. It's a navy suit with this kind of very specific deconstructed wrapped neckline of the lapels. It was very, very cool. As well as some stacked jewelry by David Yurman and shoes by Jimmy Choo. And yeah, she had this beautiful braid ponytail. It seems like she's had a lot more fun with her fashion ever since leaving the White House. Much more comfortable in this position, I think.
Yeah, totally. It's been kind of like a 180. You can tell she's adding more of her personality in her apparel.
Yeah, and on to someone else who's, I would say, adding a little bit of pizzazz to her styling. Kamala Harris has been known for having, that kind of suit, the pantsuit, like that's been her signature for, good couple of months now whenever she's been seen in public. So Kamala Harris's suit for the first day of the convention was from Chloe, which is obviously a French brand, a brown suit. Signifying kind of a bit of a nod to high fashion, yet still very much calling back to everything else that she's worn in the past. I believe that the color of the suit was specific because it was also called coconut brown, referring to one of her speeches. I don't know if you saw that, Tatiana.
That viral, yep.
Yeah, so I think in the clip, she had said something about people falling out of a coconut tree and like how like that has really played a role in like the way that she's seeing the voters nowadays. Like she hasn't fallen out of a coconut tree. She's been around forever and she's taking a bit of a hard stance. So it's interesting if this is like a nod to that's intentional. From what I understand from the campaign coordinator or commentator, it wasn't. It just happened to be coincidence. But I just feel like it would be too much of a coincidence not to be similar.
I think it's so playful. And honestly, like one thing about VP Harris's team is they're very tuned into the culture. You can see it on her TikTok page or her campaign's TikTok page. They know that viral clip is all over. And they know that people have been using it as a trend as a sound trend on TikTok. So I wouldn't be surprised if that was a very small, subtle nod to just tell people, hey, we see it, we hear you. We're tuned into the culture.
Oh, yeah. And the final kind of fashion piece from the DNC came from Ella Emhoff, who is Kamala's stepdaughter, right? Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, so she wore a number of different items. One is obviously the Tom Brown suit. And actually, Michelle Obama is the one who actually ended up putting Tom Brown on the map, wearing his creations and obviously the suiting in particular, I think a couple of years ago. So Ella wore a plaid wool linen suit from the fall 2024 collection. And before that, she wore this kind of very famous and iconic piece, the camo kind of trucker hat. And that's something that, has been kind of popping up in the cultural conversation, and we'll go into that a little bit later. But for the suit, apparently a similar suit is available at Nordstrom for $2,400. And the day before, Emhoff was also wearing seeing a shirt by Helmut Lang, kind of highlighting that distinctive fashion sense that she's shown up on multiple different catwalks. Any thoughts on that outfit? I feel like Ella's always been a little bit of an outlier on the fashion scene. She likes to go for the unconventional.
No, I totally agree. I think since the inauguration, all eyes have been on Ella and her style. It's very distinctive. It's very fashion forward and edgy. And I think this is probably the first time where we've had a child, or she's not a child, excuse me, but, someone who is definitely very distinctive, has their own personality, has their own fashion POV, and isn't really kind of assimilating or kind of, blending in. She was on the cover of Dust, and she's been in other magazines. She's also walked in Fashion Week, and she's signed to IMG, and she's been a part of the Tom Brown cohort for a minute. So just to see someone who is a child of a politician or a politician's partner, it's really fun to see her being a little bit more playful and not as safe as, they've been in the past.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that that's like the conversation that we're going to be getting into in this episode is around, the kind of more subversive, unconventional choices, and also the way that, fashion and beauty is showing up in this election. Because obviously everything has subtext and meaning. And I think this is actually something that you've written about in your latest stories around Kamala Harris's kind of I'd say beauty strategy, but at least like some of the things that have come out of the choices she's made with, particularly with her hairstyles. So I know that there was a bit of a discussion last year. I think it was with KK Palmer on a recording that they had for a podcast about this kind of silk press, or kind of the technique that Kamala uses. So I was wondering, since you wrote the stories, can you explain a little bit about how that came about and how it's shown up?
Yeah. So about a year ago, a little over a year ago, was in July. Keke Palmer had a sit-down interview with Kamala Harris. And the initial conversation was about Black maternal health. And there was a moment during the conversation where Keke asked Kamala, how do you juggle all of these things? You have a stepdaughter, you are running for, the highest office in America, and, you continuously show up. How do you manage keeping your hair done? Because in the Black community, we oftentimes have been very vocal about how hard it is to maintain hair that society deems as professional. That maintenance requires a lot of time, a lot of money, and a lot of patience, I would say. So that playful exchange between the two really spiraled into this viral moment where Kamala is talking about what she does to maintain her silk press. And for me, when I initially saw that clip, I immediately thought wow, this is going to be so significant because, first of all, this is historic regardless of her hairstyle. Kamala being the first woman of color on a major party ticket for the presidential election. It's major. So a lot of her choices, style and beauty alike, are going to be under a different lens than candidates prior. And especially when it comes to hair, because hair in the Black community is so political. There are so many historical subtexts. From the beginning, Black hair has been seen as less ideal or less appealing. So we've struggled a lot with really figuring out how to blend into what I would say is professional culture. It's been seen as unprofessional. It's been seen as, not beautiful. So to have someone representing us on the highest, in the highest position, in the highest office, and to see her very intentional choices with her hair, I knew that regardless if I covered her, someone was going to cover how important her choices are going to be in terms of how people were going to perceive her. And I don't think I'm pretty sure we don't have anyone in office who wears their hair curly, whether they're Democrat, Republican, however they choose to identify politically. We don't really see women in general have any other hairstyle besides straight in a bob or straight with a slight waves, because just women, we're scrutinized under a different lens, just historically. And then again, even deeper lens when you are a woman of color. So I think just seeing her choose to wear a silk press, I think it was very intentional. I don't know how well received it would be if she wore her hair and her natural texture, which is, I think, slightly curly. It's all intentional. Everything is so strategic in terms of, again, she's running for this office where she has to be liked by everyone. So I think wearing that silk press is probably the best choice for her. Is the best choice, yeah.
Yeah, of course. And obviously she highlighted the fact that it was, a ball brush and essentially a hairbrush. And that's kind of how she does it. She's not promoting any kind of use of chemical relaxers, which have been kind of linked to, cancer and all kinds of things that, women shouldn't have to use just to make sure that their hair looks professional. And, it's very encouraging to see people like Michelle Obama also, coming out and wearing braids and seeing that that's not a necessity anymore, maybe for political appearances.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, going back to what we talked about earlier, just seeing Michelle Obama on that stage at the DNC wearing braids, it was a huge conversation piece because she's been vocal about, feeling the pressures to wear her hair straight when she was when she was the first lady. She had that pressure to wear the straight hair because she didn't want to be perceived as unprofessional. She didn't want to make too much of a political statement with her hair choices. So I think she very much so made a very intentional choice when she wore those braids, the DNC.
Yeah, of course. And obviously that kind of classic hairstyle is also making an appearance. Obviously, Hillary Clinton also made an appearance with her kind of very classic bob from way back in the heyday. It looked very good. And I think you covered that, Tatiana, as well. Tell me a little bit more about her choices, because obviously that's something that is almost a signature for her by now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, she's been wearing this bob since I think the 90s. She's posted an Instagram photo in January talking about being in my bob era, which was really funny. But again, I think women in political office, they have to be very intentional about how they show up, how, they look, from hair to their outfits to even their shoes and their jewelry. They're going to be scrutinized much differently than men are. Even if you look at like their jewelry, for instance, I remember when Kamala, just taking it back to Kamala for a moment, she wore a Tiffany necklace, and someone made a comment on Twitter or X saying, how can she talk about being for the working class if she's wearing a $10,000 Tiffany necklace? It's giving a little bit of tone deaf. Even if you look at like their wedding bands, for instance, I don't even think Kamala wears her wedding band because it's a little too flashy. So they have to be very, very intentional about how they show up. Very subtle. One of my favorite fashion and beauty commentators, her name is Shelby. She said that, they're showing up for a job interview. She's showing up to run for the president, and she cannot be flashy. She has to be very subtle. She has to be very professional. So even referencing back to Hillary, this bob, she's showing up to represent the people. The majority of the class in America is working class. So she's showing up to represent these people who can't afford to get extensions, can't afford to get really, really fancy, flashy hair color or highlights because they have to maintain the daily maintenance of that, which is kind of expensive. So to see her just so slightly highlight her gray hair, I thought it was very, very smart. I thought it was very strategic. And her hair looked fabulous, but it looked also like relatable and achievable, which I think is like really the bottom line here. Looking relatable, looking achievable, and not looking super glam.
Yeah, of course. And that also extends out to some of the fashion items that I would say have picked up a little bit during the election campaign and over the last couple of months. One being the Jackie dress by this brand called Tuckernuck that's coming out of Nantucket. And the other obviously being the camo hat. So I wanted to get into that a little bit more for, I guess, like the second part of our podcast. I don't know if you've seen the Jackie dress, but I know it's kind of a very short, kind of obviously inspired by Jackie Kennedy. And it's a popular dress worn at the convention in previous times, both on the Republican side and on the Democratic, kind of looking at that bipartisan appeal. It's a little bit weird. Like usually when you have a particular clothing item, it kind of ends up staying within those partisan lines. What did you think? Do you like it?
Personally speaking, I'm not a huge dress person anyway. I prefer a nice pantsuit. But I think like what you talked about, having that bipartisan appeal is really hard for any brand to do. So to be able to, strategically create a piece of clothing that everyone likes, I think it's smart. I think it's impressive. Me personally, I'm not a fan of the dress, but it really doesn't matter what I think. I think again, like to have something that both sides are wearing, it's very, very, very unlikely. So I thought it was pretty cool and interesting.
Yeah, definitely. And it seems like it's doing really well for the brand. It's sold out like multiple times over. They've put it out in multiple colorways. I think Rachel Tashjan from the Washington Post did a very extensive article and deep dive on, the kind of cultural messaging behind the Jackie dress. And I guess like how it's showing up in meme culture, which, we've talked about with Kamala Harris kind of being tapped into that like social media, like what is going on there and how people are talking about her. So I think it's one of those things that's almost like a neutral backdrop. Like it doesn't seem to have enough of like a one side or another. And I think that this also extends to the camo hat, which has been kind of showing up with the Harris-Walz campaign. So the camo hat, from what I believe, was It sold out really quickly. It's basically just like a very typical kind of hunter camo background with orange writing. And it sold out. I think it said it's 1 million have been sold of the hats as of early August. And a lot of kind of Substack authors, including Delia Kai from D's Links and Emily Sundberg from Feed Me, have kind of talked a little bit about the significance of this camo hat and how it's playing into, you know, tropes that are typically, I would say, a little bit more Republican, even with, you know, Walz saying that he's an avid hunter. So I'm wondering, you know, what do you think about the hat? Because obviously it's made its rounds on social media. A lot of people are wearing it. Is there a little bit of like a political ambivalence, I guess, to wearing it? Like, you're not really signifying anything, but at the same time, you are kind of putting forward a political statement.
Yeah. First of all, I thought the hat was brilliant. I think it kind of references back to that Jackie dress where you appeal to both sides for different reasons, whether it be ironic or, you know, very straightforward. So that camo hat, I think it signifies, you know, hey, again, we understand the general population, a general American population. You know, they're very proud to be American, regardless of the side. And I think that camo print in general, it just resonates with so many people for various reasons. So I think it was super strategic. And then, you know, it's also very trendy. Everyone's wearing a trucker hat right now. Everyone wants that like really cool branding. I think the color choice was really strategic too. Orange for me, it feels very gender neutral. And the timing of it too, I thought was very smart. It came out almost as soon as VP Harris announced that she was running for president. So I think there were so many different elements to why the hat was successful. The first time I saw the hat was on TikTok. I didn't even see it on online. I didn't see it via VP Harris's team or the organization that dropped the hat. I saw someone post it on TikTok, and I'm sure that also contributed to its really quick sellout.
Yeah, of course. And, you know, obviously I would say that, you know, the kind of first people who made the trucker hat a little bit more popular was obviously the Republican side, with Trump's kind of MAGA hat. And I'm wondering if this is a little bit of like a response. Like, is this a way to kind of take away that almost iconic imagery and shift that power a little bit more to the Democratic side?
Yeah, I thought it was I think it's for those who may not identify as Republican. I think it was more so ironic and satirical than anything. But it also was a very straightforward campaign hat.
Yeah.
So, you know, it can be read. It can be read either way.
Yeah, of course. I think that print is always something that's really interesting. And Sundberg from Feed Me mentioned that, you know, there's a huge amount of Republican voters who kind of want to identify maybe with the Democratic Party in other ways. And, you know, Harris is obviously going to try and reach them in different ways. So maybe this is also a way of trying to speak the same language. You know, I know that fashion has a lot of different signifiers. And I think if you, as you said, like before, if you go to elitist, like, you know, wearing a Tiffany's necklace, like it's that kind of thing, it ends up affecting how those people will view you. And as a result, it might take away that vote in November. So I'm wondering, do you have any other kind of thoughts around what I guess the significance of those fashion and beauty choices are? And do you think there'll be more of that as the election campaign goes on? Or do you think this will be it, obviously, because this is the biggest event from the Democratic Convention?
Yeah, I mean, I think just moving forward, the strategy for the Harris campaign really is to connect with middle America and do it in a very strategic, relatable way that feels authentic to the campaign and also the community that they're trying to connect with. So I foresee moving forward a continuation of, you know, very subtle hints of quiet luxury. But overall, like, you know, you don't see either Walz or Harris in any super tailored, super fine pieces of jewelry either. So I think they'll continue to well, first of all, Harris is definitely going to continue to wear pantsuits. I don't think we're ever going to see her in a skirt or a dress. And I think someone on social media made a really good point about that, about women, especially wearing skirts or dresses. There's opportunities being on a stage for their areas to be photographed in non-desirable ways. So she has to be really strategic about that, which is why I think she chooses to wear pantsuits. But, there'll probably be more moments of her wearing luxury brands. But I think overall, we'll just continue to see both of them in relatable, not tailored or not extremely tailored, middle America business casual.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a lot of kind of opportunity for brands to maybe contribute some items to the campaign that are very much in that line of, Kamala Harris's styling. I'm sure that that's going to carry on, as we get closer and closer to the election. All right. Well, I think that is all of the time that we have this week. So don't forget to give us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you're listening to this. It really helps us out a lot. Tatiana, thank you so much for being on for the first time on the Glossy Pod. It was really fun to have you on.
Yeah, of course.
And if you haven't listened already, I spoke to Lucy Aylen from UK brand Never Fully Dressed about the brand's expansion to the US on the Glossy podcast. And don't forget to subscribe to the Glossy podcast to hear interviews with industry insiders every Wednesday, and week in review episodes every Friday. Thanks for listening.